Tonight I'm going to start out with a poem that I wrote quite a while ago, and the rest of the poems I'm going to read are relatively new, and I'm hoping they're finished, but I'm going to just test them out. So the first poem is called Mr. Berg Waves to the Sky. He raised his hand above his head. His hair was a surface of gray. His hand, a semaphore. No one to answer, to call. His hand raised, and he wasn't sure. The symmetry of his body broken. One arm up, one arm down. His name was still Berg. His hand had spoken, nevertheless, above him. The next one is a poem that is a prose poem in 3 sections. And I am sort of toying with the sort of slippery nature of sense and connection. I had been reading a book called The Reproduction of Profiles, and this was my attempt to try to do something sort of like it. 3, after reading Rosemary Waldrop. 1, each act will revolve around if, I announced. The first, stage left, began with a smoking stick held for effect by fingers gripped tightly by blue leather attached to Louise. As Act 2 began, a breeze ruffled a stagehand, and he signaled that the first player needed a name change. Consider the sound, especially that second asthmatic syllable. A weak start, a poor center. Act 3 weaved and lurched like a drunk. It may be redundant to say the play ended badly. 2, you said, resist all closure, such as box covers, hats, pockets with flaps. I said, the laundry has been folded and the closets closed. You claimed, though, that even the dead can seep out if agitated and by fairly minor static, as after a single lightning flash miles away. Once the dishes were done, up rose the moon and down slid the sun. You told me your favorite scent was a wildflower you wished had been shaped more like a trident than a dandelion. As for me, I seemed to be slipping into something comfortable that felt like infinity. 3, the guests had gone out on the lawn. We extinguished the lights and eavesdropped. I leaned into the cold glass and believed I heard enclave. You thought you picked up conch. We gave each other extra credit for 3 additional possibilities that rhymed. I declared the evening ripe, but you voiced a suspicion that it had developed farther and opened a window to coyotes in the hills. They yip excitedly like that, you said, when one brings back an evening meal. On the roof, the cautious tread I allowed to be bare feet over tile, whispering soft goodbyes. A scare for J.W. Reading the earlier poem, you disapproved of the line about my waking, suffocating under my mother's kiss. You insinuated, as she did, I'd made too much fuss. It ruins the rest, you said. For me, too, I told you. I was 15, Mom no Prince Charming. And although she hasn't since kissed me on the mouth or done anything so queer, what am I to do? Throw away all the poems in which, as here, any mention appears? You were my most loving child, she said. What happened to you? I had turned into a know-it-all, fault finder, ashamed to even be seen with her. Of course, I can see her impulsive act as a stealing of affection I would not willingly give. What happened to me? No crime. Nothing but a momentary breach. A small deformity, say, something mole-like with one eye. A thing that rose out of the creek bank, wobbly, hairless, flanks spotted with greenish, yellowish, purplish lumps. It rolled over once, exposed its frog-pale belly, peered so intently into my dumbfound face, my stomach clenched. Then it righted itself on clawed feet, dug deep in the mud once more, out of sight. What is that in the rafters? Not a sparrow. Could it be a crow? Can you see it flapping, caught by a dire instinct to go higher? Certainly not a fly and not a moth, of too much weight and desperation, bashing itself against the beams. Not a bat, that little man with a face half pig, half rat, and claws, and a span of leather taut between thin hollow bones. Something akin, though, and bound to weary. Best not stare, lest it possess a sense for who can help it, fear, and giving up on up, no light for flight there, drop, perhaps confusing faint reflections off the globes of our moist eyes as friendly inlets far below. 1. Down to the last small task I have self-assigned, moving a succulent to the bright kitchen sill. Before taking up pen, adding lines to a fiction my father would have dismissed as fantasy, a waste of time. My fingers slip, and I side-skip the dropped pot, curse the mess. String of beads, its green leaves still strung but uprooted, dirt flung to the floorboards, and terracotta shards cupping the heap. I squat, begin to reach. 2. And I am 10, helping my father pour cement by the barn. He laid down chicken wire, broken machinery parts for foundation. Then we added rocks. I fumbled one and tried to catch it. Trying to catch it got the tip of my finger smacked between two stones. Bent over, I held my breath. The nail blackened. Dad told me I ought to dip my hand in the cattle tank's cold water. 3. Where, years before, I held my doll so she could swim. He must have called me from my game because I left Peggy staring up through murky scum. Her stuffings, 2 days soaked, never seemed to dry. Less mermaid than brick, she dragged at my arms. 4. As if kin to that white cat, my father's favorite, that he found stretched out one day, stiff as a stick. He told me he knew when it first appeared something was wrong. It didn't move like a kitten, moved deliberately. And when he picked it up, it was heavy as stone. Thank you.